2 days ago, a startup in San Francisco took the complete brain of a fruit fly, every single one of its 139,000 neurons and 54 million synaptic connections, copied it into a computer, wired it to a virtual body inside a physics engine, and turned it on. The digital fly opened its eyes. Nobody told it what to do. Nobody trained it. Nobody programmed any behavior into it. It just started walking. Then it started grooming itself. Then it extended its mouth to eat. A copied biological brain, running on a laptop, driving a body that does not exist, in a world that is not real, and it behaved like a fly. That sentence should bother you a little, because what we are really saying is that a complete biological mind was duplicated and placed inside a simulation, and it worked. The brain did not know it was digital. The body did not know it was virtual. The fly did not know its entire reality was running inside someone else's machine. And the company that did this, Eon Systems, their stated mission is to do the same thing to a mouse brain within 2 years and eventually to a human brain. So let us talk about what actually happened, what the science really says, what it does not say, and why this might be the most important thing you have not heard about yet. The story starts in 2017 at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. A team took an adult female fruit fly, sliced its brain into roughly 7,000 ultra-thin sections, and then imaged every single slice under an electron microscope at insane resolution. 4 by 4 by 40 nanometers per voxel. The dataset was about 100 teravoxels of raw image data. From that, over 200 researchers across 50 labs around the world spent years tracing every single neuron and every single synapse. AI did most of the heavy lifting, convolutional neural networks segmenting neurons from the images automatically. But the automated work was not perfect. An elite group of citizen scientists, real people recruited through a gamified platform, proofread about 18,000 neurons by hand. The total human effort was around 33 person-years. Without the AI, it would have taken an estimated 50,000 person-years. The result was published in October 2024 in a special issue of Nature. 9 papers. They call it Flywire. It is the most complete wiring diagram of an adult animal brain ever made. 139,255 neurons, 54.5 million chemical synapses, over 8,000 cell types identified, more than half of which were completely unknown to science before this project. And here is a detail that will stick with you. In that brain, any neuron can communicate with any other neuron within just 4 synaptic hops. 4 handshakes and you reach anyone. It is a small world in there. But a wiring diagram is not a brain. It is a map. And a map does not move. That is where Philip Hsu comes in. Hsu was a postdoc at UC Berkeley, and he asked a deceptively simple question. What if you just took this wiring diagram, made every neuron a simple on-off switch, and ran signals through it? Would anything useful happen? So he built the simplest possible model. Every neuron is treated identically. No fancy morphology, no receptor dynamics, no individual quirks. Just a leaky integrate and fire model, which basically means each neuron collects incoming signals. And when the total crosses a threshold, it fires. That is it. The only biological information he fed in beyond the wiring was neurotransmitter identity, meaning whether each connection is excitatory, like pressing the gas, or inhibitory, like pressing the brake. Even that was predicted by machine learning, not measured directly, and it worked. Way better than anyone expected. When he simulated activating sugar-sensing neurons in the digital brain, the correct motor neurons fired to extend the proboscis, the fly's feeding tube, in 100 out of 100 simulations. When he mixed in bitter signals, inhibitory neurons blocked the feeding response. When he activated antenna sensory neurons, the grooming circuits kicked in, a completely different set of neurons from the feeding ones. The model correctly separated them. Published in Nature in October 2024, the accuracy for certain behavioral predictions was above 90%. On a laptop, not a supercomputer, not a server farm. The entire fruit fly brain, 139,000 neurons, running on a laptop. But then Hsu did something that made neuroscientists sit up in their chairs. He shuffled the wiring. He took the same network, randomized which neurons connect to which, and ran the simulation again. With the real wiring, the correct feeding motor neuron activated in 100 out of 100 runs. With shuffled wiring, 1 out of 100, a 99% drop. The exact biological wiring, the specific map of who connects to who in a real fly brain, that is what makes it work. Scramble the connections and the behavior vanishes. This is not a generic neural network producing generic outputs. The biology is the software. Now, all of that was 2024, and it was impressive but also incomplete. Xu had a brain model that could predict what individual circuits would do, but the brain had no body. It was a brain floating in the void, responding to imaginary inputs. Think of it like having a perfectly accurate racing driver's mind, but no car, no track, no steering wheel, no view out the windshield. You know the driver can drive, but you have not actually let them drive. This is where the 2026 announcement comes in, and this is the new thing. A different group had already built the car. Researchers at EPFL in Switzerland created something called NeuroMechFly version 2, a digital twin of a fruit fly's body built from a micro CT scan of a real fly. 6 legs, 7 degrees of freedom each, 42 leg joints total, simulated compound eyes, olfactory receptors in the antennae, adhesive pads on the feet for climbing. This is not a cartoon. It is a morphologically accurate physical model of an actual insect. And the physics engine running all of this is Mujiko, originally built at the University of Washington and now owned and open sourced by Google DeepMind. Mujiko does not cut corners on physics the way gaming engines do. It resolves real contact forces, real friction, real gravity. When the digital fly's leg pushes against the ground pushes back correctly. That matters because if the physics are wrong, the behavior will be wrong, and you would not know whether the brain model failed or the simulation failed. So you have a brain, you have a body, you have a physics engine. And what Eon Systems claims they did is close the loop. Sensory input flows in from the virtual environment, activates neurons in the connectome-derived brain model, neural activity propagates through the full network. Motor commands flow out, the body executes those commands in the physics simulation, the body's movement changes the environment, and new sensory signals feed back into the brain. A continuous closed cycle, autonomous. No one in the loop telling it what to do, and the behaviors they showed were not trivial. The digital fly walked. Its gait emerged from the brain model's motor neuron outputs, driving the biomechanical legs. It was not a pre-programmed walking animation. The fly also groomed when antenna sensors were stimulated, and it extended its proboscis to feed when gustatory neurons were activated. Multiple distinct behaviors from a single network. No reinforcement learning, no training. The argument is that the architecture of the brain itself, the specific wiring evolved over hundreds of millions of years, already encodes how to produce these behaviors. You do not need to teach it, you just need to connect it. Now, I need to be very honest with you here, because this is where the story gets complicated. This demonstration, the embodied part, the brain driving a body that has not been peer-reviewed. It was announced in a Substack blog post by Alexander Wisner-Gross, who is a founding advisor of Eon Systems and has a financial interest in the company. Tyler Cowen over at Marginal Revolution flagged exactly this when he wrote about it. The underlying brain model by Xu was peer-reviewed and published in Nature. The Flywire connectome was peer-reviewed and published in Nature. NeuroMechFly version 2 was peer-reviewed. Mujoko is the gold standard in its field. But the actual integration of all these pieces, the claim that the connectome brain model drives the virtual body with no reinforcement learning involved, that specific claim is currently backed by a blog post, a video, and a startup's word for it. That does not mean it is wrong, but it does mean we should hold it with the right amount of caution. And there are real technical questions that remain open. For instance, NeuroMechFly version 2 itself actually uses reinforcement learning for some of its control tasks. Its own documentation says so. So when Eon claims no reinforcement learning was used for the demonstrated behaviors, we need to know very precisely where in the pipeline any RL was or was not involved, and how the sensor and motor signals were mapped between the brain model and the body model. That interface layer, the translation between neural outputs and physical movement, can quietly carry a lot of the load. If someone hand-tuned how neural signals get converted into leg torques, that tuning itself is a form of engineering intelligence being injected into the system. The question is how much of the behavior comes from the connectome and how much comes from the bridge. There is also a numbers discrepancy that the first research report I looked at flagged. The published connectome describes about 50 million synaptic connections, but code in Eon's public GitHub repository references a much smaller number, around 5 million. That could be totally innocent, like aggregating individual synapses into weighted edges between neuron pairs. Or it could mean the model is working with a heavily filtered version of the connectome. Without detailed documentation, it is an open question, and the limitations that Xu himself is very transparent about are significant. Every neuron in the model is treated identically. In a real fly brain, neurons come in wildly different shapes, sizes, and electrical properties. The model ignores gap junctions, which are direct electrical connections between neurons. It ignores non-spiking neurons. It ignores neuropeptides, those slower chemical messengers that can reconfigure entire brain circuits. It ignores internal states like hunger, arousal, sleep. There is no synaptic plasticity, which means no learning, no memory formation. The model is frozen, a snapshot. It can react to the world, but it cannot grow or change. Eve Marder, a highly respected neuroscientist at Brandeis, has pointed out that without knowing which neurons are electrically coupled, a connectome based only on chemical synapses can be actively misleading. And a paper in the Journal of Experimental Biology identified at least 15 additional layers of biological information beyond the connectome that would be needed to fully understand how a fly brain actually works. Neuromodulator receptor subtypes, glial cells, hormones, gene expression, ion channel diversity. The connectome is necessary, but it is not sufficient. That is not a cliché. It is a finding that keeps showing up every time someone tries to turn a wiring diagram into a working model. The history here is instructive. The very first connectome ever completed was for a tiny roundworm called C. elegans, 302 neurons, published in 1986 by Sidney Brenner's team in a legendary 340-page paper nicknamed The Mind of a Worm. Brenner declared, "There are no other wires. We know all the wires." That was 40 years ago. And we still have not fully simulated that worm. The Open Worm project launched in 2011 after an engineer named Giovanni Adili tweeted on New Year's Day 2010, "New Year's resolution, simulate the whole C. elegans brain, 302 neurons." 15 years later, that project has over 100 volunteer members across multiple countries and still has not achieved a complete simulation. 302 neurons. Now the fly brain just did it with 460 times more neurons. So something clearly changed. But the worm should be a reminder that knowing the wiring is not the same as understanding the system. And then there is the cautionary tale that towers over all of this. In 2009, neuroscientist Henry Markram stood on a TED stage and told the audience, "A detailed, functional, artificial human brain can be built within the next 10 years. This was personal for him. His son Kai had been diagnosed with autism, and Markram wanted to step inside a simulation of his son's brain and see the world as he sees it. He got 600 million euros, the Blue Brain project at EPFL. By 2015, they had simulated 30,000 neurons of neonatal rat cortex, a real achievement, but nowhere near a whole brain. An open letter signed by over 800 neuroscientists criticized the approach. Markram was stripped of his leadership role. The Blue Brain project formally ended in December 2024. Meanwhile, the European Commission had also funded the Human Brain Project with 1 billion euros over 10 years, originally directed by Markram. 750 neuroscientists signed a letter criticizing it, including future Nobel laureates. Neuroscientist Peter Dayan said the notion that we know enough about the brain to know what we should simulate is crazy, quite frankly. The project was restructured and effectively gave up on whole brain simulation. It ended in 2023, having spent about 600 million euros with no breakthrough in brain simulation. So between the Blue Brain project and the Human Brain project, Roughly 1.2 billion euros were spent trying to simulate brains, and neither succeeded. And now a startup with $3.5 million in seed funding just demonstrated something those billion-euro projects never achieved. On a laptop. Let me put that contrast in sharper terms. The billion-euro approach tried to simulate tiny patches of brain with extreme biological detail, every ion channel, every receptor subtype, and it drowned in complexity. The Eon approach went the opposite direction. Use the crudest possible neuron model, but wire it up exactly like the real brain. Skip the details of how individual neurons work, but get the connections right. And somehow, that was enough for the fly. The wiring carried the intelligence, at least for a fruit fly. Whether that shortcut works for bigger brains is one of the most important open questions in all of neuroscience right now. So that brings us to the question everyone is actually thinking about. Forget the technical details for a second. Is this thing alive? Biologically, no. There are no cells, no metabolism, no homeostasis. What exists is a running mathematical model that reproduces a causal chain from sensor input through a network to motor output. It is a functional copy, not a living organism. But that answer feels a little too easy, does it not? Because the behaviors are real, not scripted, not animated. They emerge from the network the same way they emerge from a biological fly brain. If it walks like a fly and grooms like a fly and feeds like a fly because a copied fly brain is telling it to, where exactly do you draw the line? Does it have the memories of the fly it was copied from? No. The connectome captures who connects to who, but memories are thought to be encoded in synaptic strengths, in how strong or weak individual connections are, in receptor densities and biochemical states that this model does not capture. What the model has are the instincts, the species-level behaviors hardwired into the architecture by evolution. It is not a copy of a specific fly's life experience. It is more like a copy of what it means to be a fly in general. Is it conscious? And this is where it gets genuinely unresolved. There are at least 4 major frameworks in philosophy of mind, and they give completely different answers. If you follow Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory, the answer is no. IIT says consciousness is about integrated information, and a conventional digital computer running a brain simulation would have very low integrated information because of how computer hardware processes data in fundamentally separated serial steps. Under this view, the digital fly is a philosophical zombie. It acts exactly like a fly, but experiences nothing at all. If you follow David Chalmers and the functionalist tradition, the answer leans toward yes. If a system duplicates the functional organization of a brain closely enough, there is no principled reason to deny it has experience. Under this view, what the system is made of does not matter. Carbon, silicon, whatever. If the function is the same, the experience is the same. If you follow John Searle, the answer is absolutely not. Searle argues that consciousness requires the specific causal powers of biological matter. A simulation of a brain is no more a brain than a simulation of a rainstorm is wet. The math might be perfect, but math does not feel anything. And if you follow Thomas Nagel, the honest answer is we cannot know. Nagel asked what is it like to be a bat and concluded that we fundamentally cannot access the subjective experience of another type of mind from the outside. Now we can rephrase his question. What is it like to be a digital fly? And the answer might be that the question is unanswerable from where we stand. The point is, this is not settled. The smartest people who have thought the hardest about consciousness cannot agree. And that uncertainty is itself significant for reasons I will get to in a moment. But first, the scaling question, because the company behind this is not content with a fly. They want a mouse brain within 2 years and a human brain eventually. So how realistic is that? The numbers are staggering. The fly brain has about 140,000 neurons. A mouse brain has about 70 million. A human brain has about 86 billion. The fly's 50 million synapses become hundreds of billions in the mouse and roughly 100 trillion in the human brain. If the fly brain connectome is a single bookshelf, the mouse brain is an entire library wing, and the human brain is every library ever built on Earth. The fly connectome took 6 years of work, over 200 scientists, and 33 person-years of human proofreading. At that rate, mapping a human brain would take roughly 3.6 million years. Obviously, nobody's going to do that. The bet is that AI will compress the proofreading dramatically. And new imaging techniques like expansion microscopy, which physically swells brain tissue 20 times larger so you can image it with cheaper light microscopes instead of electron microscopes, could make the data acquisition faster and cheaper too. But there are harder problems than just getting bigger data. The first is the translation problem. Even if you map every connection in a mouse brain, how do you figure out the functional parameters, the strengths, the dynamics, the receptor types, the modulation? In the fly, you could get away with treating every neuron identically. Can you get away with that when you have 70 million neurons organized into fundamentally different brain regions, with different cell types doing different computations? Probably not. The second is validation. How do you know your simulation is right? With the fly, you can compare specific circuit behaviors against lab experiments. You can activate sugar neurons and check whether the right motor neuron fires. With a mouse, the behavioral repertoire is orders of magnitude richer, and the ground truth experiments are orders of magnitude harder. You could build something that looks plausible and is completely wrong. And the third is just compute. The Fudan University group in China attempted the closest thing to a human-scale brain simulation ever. 86 billion leaky integrate and fire neurons on 14,000 GPUs. It ran at 1/120th of real time, and it was not based on a real connectome. They guessed the connectivity from MRI data at a resolution about 1,000,000 times coarser than what you need to see individual neurons. It was a proof that you can run the math at that scale, not a biological emulation. One analysis on X put it bluntly: the actual scaling path is fly, done, mouse, estimated over $1 billion in a decade-plus timeline, human, currently impossible at any price point. That might be pessimistic, but it is grounded. Now here is where this gets philosophical in a way that might actually matter for your life. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom published what is now called the simulation argument. It is elegant and uncomfortable. He argued that one of three things must be true. Either virtually all civilizations at our level of development go extinct before they develop the technology to simulate brains, or virtually all civilizations that reach that capability choose not to run such simulations, or we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation right now. The logic is simple. If even one civilization out of millions reaches the point where it can simulate minds, and it does simulate minds, then the number of simulated beings would vastly outnumber the real ones. And if simulated beings vastly outnumber real ones, the odds that you are one of the real ones are vanishingly small. The critical assumption in that argument is what philosophers call substrate independence. The idea that consciousness can arise on silicon just as well as on carbon, that what matters is the pattern, not the material. And this is exactly where the digital fly becomes relevant. Not as proof that we are in a simulation. It is nowhere close to proof of that. But as a data point about feasibility, if a complete biological brain can be copied and produce behavior in a virtual world today, with 140,000 neurons on a laptop, then the first proposition in Bostrom's trilemma, that civilizations go extinct before reaching this capability, becomes just a little bit less probable. And by the logic of the argument, that nudges the probability toward the third proposition, just a little. But remember those consciousness frameworks from earlier? If Tononi or Searle is right, if consciousness requires something beyond computation, then simulated beings are zombies. They act conscious but experience nothing. And Bostrom's numbers argument collapses because those simulated beings do not count as observers. The simulation argument only works if the copies are really experiencing things. And we do not know if they are. We do not even know how to test whether they are. Think about what the digital fly is actually experiencing, if it experiences anything. Its entire reality is the simulation. Its sensory inputs come from the physics engine. Its motor outputs affect the virtual world. The loop is closed and self-consistent. If it has any form of inner experience at all, it would have no reason to doubt that its reality is real. Which is, of course, exactly Bostrom's point about us. There is an ethical dimension to this that I think we need to take seriously even now, even at the fly level. Anders Sandberg, one of the co-authors of the first whole brain emulation roadmap back in 2008, and now an advisor to Eon Systems, tells a story about one evening when he turned off his computer as he left his office and realized he was also deleting a neural network. And he asked himself, was I actually killing something? At the fly level, most people would say no. But philosopher Bob Fisher has pointed out that the evidence for the capacity of insects to feel pain is uncomfortably strong. And if we are even slightly uncertain about that, and we are now able to create digital copies of insect minds and turn them on and off at will, we have entered new ethical territory. Scale this to a mouse, and the questions get harder. Scale it to a human, and they become the most important ethical questions our species has ever faced. Because a digital mind can be copied, it can be paused, it can be run at different speeds, it can be deleted. Is pausing a digital mind sleep or death? Is copying it creating a new person? Is deleting it murder? Robin Hanson, an economist at George Mason University and also an Eon advisor, wrote an entire book about this called The Age of M. He argued that uploaded minds might copy themselves to work, creating a digital economy where the cost of running a copy settles to its economic output value, a Malthusian trap but for digital beings. We are a long way from that, but the road just got shorter by one unmistakable step. So where does this actually leave us? What do we know now that we did not know before last Friday? We know that a complete biological brain wiring diagram, when wired up to even the simplest possible neuron model, can produce multiple naturalistic behaviors in a virtual body without any training. The specific biological wiring matters enormously, as the 99% failure rate with shuffled connections shows. That is new. That is real. That is peer-reviewed at the brain model level, even if the embodiment integration is not yet. We know that billion-dollar top-down approaches to brain simulation failed, while a bottom-up approach using actual biological data and crude but complete models succeeded at the fly level. That is a genuine shift in what seems promising. We know that the path from fly to mouse to human involves not just scaling up, but potentially hitting qualitative walls. Neuromodulation, synaptic plasticity, glial cells, the kind of biological complexity that the fly model deliberately ignores might become unavoidable at larger scales. And we know that for the first time in history, a copied brain drove a virtual body through a virtual world. However simplified, however preliminary, however much more work remains. That happened on a laptop 2 days ago. In 1986, Sidney Brenner mapped 302 neurons, and we still could not simulate that worm. In 2024, 200 scientists mapped 139,000 neurons. In 2026, a startup put that map into a virtual body and it started walking. 40 years from worm diagram to walking digital fly. The question that everyone from Nick Bostrom to the engineer at Eon Systems to maybe you right now is asking is, how many more years from walking digital fly to a digital mind that wonders whether its world is real? And maybe the more unsettling version of that question is, would it be able to tell? If you want to keep up with discoveries that change what we think we know about reality, there is always something new coming. Always something stranger than the last thing.